Hello, wild wanderers and fellow nature nerds. Thank you for tuning in to Dirt Dispatch number 10. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about today. The first is an addendum to the last full episode of the Dispatches from the Forest podcast, where I was talking about monarchs, and I meant to include this information, and I completely forgot until after I had published it. So I'm going to share it with you today. So Buckley Space Force Base, which is just southeast of Denver, is promoting monarch conservation on military installations by restoring about 1,000 acres of shortgrass prairie. They're actually partnering with some monarch conservation groups to establish some monitoring and tagging programs, but they're actually restoring habitat because, as I've said before, migrating monarch butterfly populations have declined by quite a bit over recent years, and a lot of that is due to habitat loss. So they actually employ a U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologist, and they're working to conserve some habitat, to establish some good habitat for monarchs that are migrating. So that's fantastic. That's so good to hear. The other thing I want to talk about is the Swainson's hawks are back in town. Now, we get Swainson's hawks. They're a little bit smaller than red-tailed hawks, but they're really interesting. And some of them do breed here in Wyoming, but for the most part, they breed much farther north. And they actually have the second longest migration of any bird, right behind peregrine falcons. So they breed farther north, they winter in South America, and their migration route takes them south through here, and almost the entire population of Swainson's hawks funnels through the country of Panama on their way down to farther south in South America. Now, when they're here, they feed mainly on insects. They eat a lot of insects, and they especially like grasshoppers, which is something that we have in abundance in Wyoming in August and September. So it's good to see them. They're actually very vocal. They make a lot of noise, a lot of calls, so it's pretty easy to spot them or to know when they're around. All right, the third thing I'm going to tell you about. In one of my early episodes, I talked about corvids, so birds in the family of corvids, which are ravens, crows, magpies, and jays. Some of my favorite birds. They're super smart, super intelligent, just fascinating birds. So on Sunday, outside the house here, there was a bunch of magpies, clearly upset, making a lot of racket. And corvids are kind of the tattletales of the nature world. When you hear corvids, especially, making a lot of noise, whether it's magpies or crows, something's up. And if you go check it out, you're going to find something. So I looked out the window. All these magpies were in the bushes, in the trees. They were making a lot of noise. One of them was on the ground next to what was clearly a deceased bird of some kind. I couldn't tell from the window what it was. Now, corvids are well known for holding quote-unquote funerals for their dead. There's a couple of theories about why that is. I talked about that in that episode, but I'm going to remind you here. So one is that maybe they're assessing a potential danger. One of their members has died, and maybe there's a threat to the rest of the flock, and they're trying to figure out what it is. It might be that there's an opening in the social hierarchy. So, Bob was above me in the social hierarchy. Now Bob's gone. That's a chance for me to move up. So maybe they're assessing who it is that passed away and what that means in terms of the social structure. And the other theory is that maybe they're just mourning. Maybe this is an actual, one of our members is dead. I knew that guy, and I'm upset about it. So I went out to look, and the deceased bird was not, in fact, a magpie, but it was a pigeon that had died. I don't know how. It looked like a predator had gotten it. It wasn't fully intact. So my theory is these magpies noticed a dead bird of some kind, and they were assessing to see if there was a threat. Now, like I said, we do have hawks in the neighborhood. We have owls. We have feral and free-roaming cats, which you know my feelings on. So it's possible that one of those got it, but it seemed like these magpies were very upset and that this dead pigeon was the reason, and that maybe they were assessing a threat that was out there. Now, just this morning, Monday morning, there was a group of crows in a tree on the other side of the house that were clearly very upset. There must have been 24 crows in a big cottonwood tree next to the house. And usually that means one thing, and that means there's an owl there. So I went outside, and sure enough, the crows were up there, and they were engaging in a behavior that's called mobbing, where they all gather around, they make a lot of noise. Sometimes they'll dive bomb the offending whatever it is, owl or cat or fox or dog or whatever it is that they're mad at. In this case, they were just gathered around all up in the trees, making a whole lot of noise. The owl, for its part, it was a great horned owl, didn't seem too bothered by all the racket. So eventually they quieted down. I haven't been back out to see if the owl left or if the crows just got bored, kind of. If you ignore the bullies, sometimes the bully gets bored and goes away. So either way, though, my advice to you is if you live somewhere where you have corvids, if you have blue jays or magpies or crows or ravens or what have you, if they're making a lot of noise, go investigate and see what you find, because you're likely to find something cool. All right, that's all I have for you today. If you want to support the podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You can find out all the information on doing that at patreon.com/dispatches from the forest. Subscriptions start at just $5 a month. It's not that much, and it helps me out quite a bit. You can also check out our merch store, cafepress.com/shop/dispatches from the forest. Get yourself some Dispatches from the Forest merchandise. If you want to make a one-time donation, you can do that through PayPal. And if you want to send me an email, you can send me an email at the same address. And that's dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com. For additional content, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.